I'm 33, married and a mom to a 5-year-old girl named Lily. My husband and I have been together for almost 10 years, and up until about 6 months ago, I would have told you our life was completely normal. Happy even. We live in a small town in Pennsylvania, in a quiet neighborhood where nothing really ever happens. Or didn't. This all started on a rainy Tuesday in March. Lily was sitting on the floor of our living room coloring while I was folding laundry. The TV was on in the background, some random kid's show she liked, and I wasn't really paying attention until she suddenly said something that made me freeze. She asked me if I remembered when the fire started. I asked what fire, thinking maybe she meant something she saw on TV, or a story at daycare, but she just calmly said, "The one where we all died." That's exactly how she said it. I laughed nervously at first because, kids say weird things. I asked if she meant something. She just shook her head and went back to coloring. I let it go. But that was only the beginning. The next time was during dinner. She refused to eat her chicken nuggets, her favorite, by the way, and when I asked her why, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I don't eat meat anymore." I stopped after I saw the blood on my shirt. I tried to keep it light. I said, "What blood, sweetie?" And she just shrugged and said, "The one from the crash. The glass got stuck in my neck." My husband laughed it off. "She probably saw something on YouTube," he said, "but we monitor what she watches, and Lily doesn't know anything about car crashes, or fire, or dying. We tried to ignore it. Kids have overactive imaginations. That's what every article says, right? But then she started drawing, and that's when I stopped sleeping. Lily had always been into art. She's been drawing since she could hold a crayon, but her drawings lately, they were wrong. One showed a woman with long black hair, standing in front of a burning house, holding a baby. Another was of a car flipped upside down with 3 stick figures inside, and red scribbles covering their heads. The most recent one showed a little girl, definitely not, standing in a cemetery, pointing at a gravestone that said, "Mommy." And then, one night last month, Lily had a night terror. She screamed like she was being murdered. When I ran into her room, she was sitting straight up in bed, eyes wide, but she wasn't really awake. She was crying, repeating the same phrase over and over again. "I want my real mommy." I picked her up and rocked her for almost an hour. She eventually calmed down and fell back asleep, but I didn't. I sat there in her room, in the dark, just holding her and wondering what the hell was happening to my daughter. She's never been adopted, never had a trauma. We've never even been in a serious accident. No fires, no crashes, no reason for any of this. And yet, 2 days ago, we went to a nearby park. There's a small wooded trail behind it that we've walked dozens of times. But this time, Lily stopped cold at a certain point, stared into the trees, and whispered, "This is where they buried me. I swear to you." She wasn't joking, and I don't think this is just a kid's imagination anymore. After Lily said that, "This is where they buried me," she didn't wait for me to react. She just kept walking, like nothing happened. I stood there, frozen. The trail behind the park is maybe a mile loop. Nothing unusual about it. Families take their dogs there. I've jogged it 100 times. But that spot she stopped at? I looked around and realized something strange. There's a break in the trees right there. A kind of unofficial path, half covered in dead leaves and broken twigs. I'd never noticed it before. And Lily walked straight into it. I called out to her, trying to sound calm, but she didn't even look back. Just kept walking like she knew exactly where she was going. I ran after her, catching up within seconds, but she was completely focused, like she was being pulled. About 20 feet in, she stopped. Then she pointed. I looked down, expecting to see a squirrel, or a weird mushroom, or, honestly, I don't even know. But all that was there was dirt. Just a patch of ground between 2 trees, with a couple scattered stones nearby. Nothing that looked unusual at first glance. Then Lily said, "I remember the blue blanket. That's what she wrapped me in. She didn't want the bugs to get me." I just stood there, staring at her, trying not to panic. Because how do you respond to that? My 5-year-old was talking about being wrapped in a blanket to avoid bugs, as if she'd been dead. She reached down and started brushing at the ground with her tiny hands, like she was trying to dig. I gently pulled her back and asked her what she meant. Her face changed. She got this far-off, quiet look and said, "I don't know. I forget now. But I used to live here before the smoke." And that was it. She just shrugged and asked if we could go get ice cream, like nothing had happened. Back at the car, I buckled her in and told her we'd get ice cream but not to talk about the woods anymore, okay? She nodded, already distracted, singing along to her favorite song like a totally normal kid. But I wasn't okay. That night, after she went to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I grabbed my laptop and started looking up missing persons cases in our county. Anything that involved children, fires, crashes, anything that could even remotely match what she'd said. But nothing came up, at least not locally. Then I searched nearby counties. Still nothing. Until I widened the search statewide. That's when I found it. An article from 8 years ago, out of a small town 2 hours away. A woman, single mom, died in a house fire. Her daughter was never found. They assumed she'd died too, but the remains were never recovered. Her name? Lillian Marie. And she was 5 years old. That night, I barely slept. I just kept reading and rereading that article about the fire. It was a short piece, barely a few paragraphs. It mentioned that the fire had started in the middle of the night. The mother, a woman named Claire Marie Jensen, had been found near the front door. They believed she was trying to escape, but there was no sign of her daughter, Lillian. The article said it was possible the child's remains had been completely consumed by the fire, or that she'd died somewhere deeper inside the house, where they couldn't recover her. I couldn't stop staring at the picture. It was black and white, grainy, but the little girl in it looked so much like Lily, it made my stomach turn. Same wide-set eyes, same wavy hair. She even had the same gap in her teeth when she smiled. That was the moment I felt it in my chest. This wasn't some coincidence. Something about this was real. The article listed the address of the fire, an old farmhouse on the edge of a rural town called Gilmer's Hollow. I'd never heard of it. Population barely over 900. I looked it up on Google Maps. The town was real. The road was real. And according to satellite view, the house was still standing. Charred, boarded up, but still there. I sat back in my chair staring at the screen. My daughter, born 5 years ago, full term, healthy, with no complications, was upstairs sleeping peacefully. And yet, she had somehow remembered a place she'd never been. I decided I wasn't going to tell my husband. Not yet. He would say it was a coincidence. He'd tell me I was spiraling, that I needed to get off the internet and just go to sleep. But I knew what I'd seen in her drawings. I knew what she'd said in the woods. The next morning, I asked Lily if she wanted to go on a little adventure with me. She was all smiles. I didn't tell her where we were going. Just packed snacks, put her tablet in the back seat, and started driving. I was nervous the entire way. Every mile closer to that place, my hands got tighter on the wheel. Lily was quiet, more than usual. She watched the trees. She didn't fall asleep once. It took a little over 2 hours to get there, and the second we entered Gilmer's Hollow, Lily whispered, "I've been here before." The town of Gilmer's Hollow barely even had a gas station, just a post office, a diner, and a bunch of boarded-up buildings that looked like they hadn't seen life since the 80s. Everything about the place felt still, like a town stuck in time, quietly decaying. I didn't need GPS to find the house. Lily pointed. I hadn't told her the address. I hadn't even said we were going to a house. But as we drove down a cracked road lined with overgrown brush, she suddenly sat up straighter and said, "It's that one." And it was. The same slanted porch, the same broken windows, some now patched with rusted sheets of metal. The fire had clearly destroyed the left side of the house, but the rest was still standing. The roof sagged. The mailbox hung open. It looked completely abandoned, but something felt wrong, like the air around the house was heavier than it should have been. I parked at the end of the long dirt driveway. Lily unbuckled herself without me asking and got out of the car quietly. No tablet, no toys. She didn't even ask where we were. She walked straight up to the porch like she'd been there 100 times before. I had to stop her. I caught up just as she reached the door. The boards over it were loose, but it looked like someone had already peeled a few away. Recently, there were marks in the dirt, shoe prints. I grabbed Lily's hand, told her we shouldn't go inside. She didn't look at me. She just said, "She's not here anymore." I asked her who she meant. Lily blinked slowly, then said, "Mommy." I told her I was right here. She shook her head. The other one. My heart dropped. I asked her how she knew, how she remembered this place. She didn't answer. She just pushed open the door. I should have stopped her. I should have. But something in me, some combination of terror and curiosity, froze me in place. The inside of the house was covered in ash and dust, but underneath it you could still see the remnants of a life. A burnt armchair, a scorched kitchen counter, bits of wallpaper peeling off like old skin. The smell of smoke still lingered, faint but sour. Lily stepped over the threshold, careful, slow, like she knew exactly where the floorboards would creak. And then, with no hesitation at all, she pointed to the far end of the living room and said, "That's where I died." Lily's voice echoed in that burnt-out room like it didn't belong in the world. That's where I died. She said it without fear, without emotion, like she was pointing out a toy she'd forgotten about. I couldn't breathe for a second. The spot she pointed to was an empty space near the back corner of the house. The floor was blackened there, the boards eaten away. Behind it, a half-collapsed wall, and next to that, a door. It was old, sun-bleached, warped at the hinges, and just above the handle, scorched but still legible, was a metal plate that said cellar. I don't know why, but I walked to it. Lily didn't move. She just stood in the center of the room and watched me. I expected it to be locked. It should have been locked, but the handle turned with a low creak, and a blast of cold air hit my face. The kind of cold that doesn't belong in October. The kind of cold that feels like something is breathing beneath your skin. I opened the door. Slowly, wooden steps disappeared into the darkness. No railing, just old timber and soot. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. For a moment, all I saw was dust dancing in the beam. But then I stepped down. The air got colder and damper. The smell of mold hit next. Then something else. Something old, like mildew mixed with rot. There were shelves down there, charred but still standing, lined with boxes and cans, long expired. A collapsed water heater. A rusted rocking horse tipped on its side. But in the far corner, something caught my eye. The bricks looked different there. Newer. Clean. Like they'd been added more recently than the rest of the structure. And in front of them, a pile of old baby clothes. Tiny. Faded. Folded neatly. I froze. One of the pieces was a blue flannel blanket. Tattered. Burnt at the edge. Exactly like the one Lily had described. I didn't touch anything. I couldn't. I turned around, ready to get out. But Lily was already behind me. She'd come down without a sound. She walked past me, toward the blanket, knelt down, and gently touched the corner of it. Then she whispered something so quiet, I almost didn't hear it. I thought I was going to wake up somewhere else this time. I didn't respond to Lily. I couldn't. I just gently pulled her away from the blanket and whispered that it was time to go. She didn't argue. She just nodded, quiet and calm, like this was all normal for her. Like walking through the burned remains of someone else's life was something she understood better than I ever could. We climbed the steps and stepped back out into the light. The air outside felt thinner, sharper. It was late afternoon now, and the wind had picked up. Clouds were rolling in. When I glanced back at the house, it looked even worse than before, like it had slumped deeper into the earth in just the hour we'd been there. I was already rattled. My hands shook as I fumbled with the car keys. But the second I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. The back seat looked different. Not messy. Lily hadn't left anything back there. But disturbed. Her stuffed bunny, which she always left buckled into the middle seat, was gone. Her sippy cup was tipped over on the floor, and there were crumbs all over the passenger seat, but not from our snacks. These were old, dry, like someone had been eating crackers in my car, but we hadn't. Then I saw it. The glove compartment was open. I never opened that thing, and Lily can't reach it. But it was open, hanging loose, and the papers inside had been rifled through. My insurance card was half out, my registration folded the wrong way, and stuck between the pages, a small photograph, black and white, faded, bent in the middle like it had been handled a lot. It showed a woman standing on the porch of the same house we'd just left. She looked straight into the camera. In her arms was a little girl, no more than 5 years old, wrapped in a familiar-looking blue flannel blanket. Lily stood behind me. When she saw the photo, she leaned closer and said softly, "That's me." I asked her how it could be. She just shrugged and said, "She used to call me Little Bird." Then, in a completely different tone, more serious than I'd ever heard from her, she asked, "Mommy, who drives a red truck?" My heart stopped, because the car was parked facing the old road, and across the field, maybe 50 yards back, just barely visible behind a line of trees, was a red pickup truck, empty, engine off, but still warm. The truck didn't belong to anyone in the town, not that I could have checked right then. I was too busy trying not to panic in front of my daughter. I started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the keys between the seats. I told Lily to buckle in, trying to keep my voice calm, but she was already staring out the window, frozen, watching the truck. "Is he still here?" she asked, voice small. I didn't answer. I pulled out fast, tires spitting dust as we drove away from that house, from that truck, from all of it. I kept checking the rearview mirror. Nothing moved behind us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Not by headlights. Not by anything you could see. We didn't speak for the entire drive home. It wasn't until we were back in our driveway, hours later, safe, or what felt like safe, that Lily finally broke the silence. She turned to me as I unbuckled her and said, "He followed me before, but I never saw his face that time." That time? What does a 5-year-old mean by that time? She went inside and started playing like nothing happened. Meanwhile, I was pacing the living room, trying to process everything. The photo, the basement, the blanket, the red truck. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. That night, after Lily was asleep, I showed my husband the picture, the one we found in the glove box. He asked where I got it, and I told him everything. Or almost everything. I left out the part about her saying, "That's where I died." I wasn't ready for that conversation. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stared at the photo, flipping it over in his hands. There was writing on the back, but faded, illegible except for one word, Birdie. His face paled. He told me something I didn't expect. Back when I was still pregnant with Lily, I went through a weird phase where I kept changing name ideas. Nothing felt right. I had a long list, but none of them ever stuck. What I didn't know, what my husband had never told me, was that for the entire 3rd trimester, he secretly called her Birdie in his head. A placeholder, he said. Something sweet. Never said it out loud. Just a nickname that popped into his mind out of nowhere. He swore he hadn't told anyone, not even me. But there it was, written on the back of a photo of a girl who looked just like Lily, taken outside a house she'd never seen, wrapped in the blanket we found beneath that cellar. I didn't sleep then. I kept waking up, convinced I heard the creak of floorboards that weren't ours. Then, around 3:17 a.m., the motion light on our front porch flicked on. I grabbed my phone and quietly peeked through the blinds. A man stood in our driveway, still, unmoving, no expression, not knocking, not looking around, just standing there, facing our house. And in his hand, he held a blue blanket. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I watched the man through a tiny crack in the blinds, phone in one hand, the other gripping the window frame so tightly I thought my fingers might snap. He stood completely still under the porch light, face cast in shadow, shoulders squared like a soldier. In his left hand, dangling like a threat, was that tattered blue blanket. But it wasn't the same one from the basement. I could see that now. This one was clean, newer, not burned. But the stitching, it was identical. That same pattern, tiny birds sewn into the trim. I never noticed it before. Lily had never mentioned it. But now I realized, those birds weren't part of the fabric. Someone had hand-stitched them. Lily's blanket from when she was a baby? It had birds on the corner too, and I thought it was a cute design I'd picked at some boutique store I barely remembered. But looking at the one the man held, I knew better. It wasn't a store design. It was hers. He didn't knock, didn't move. He just stood there. I backed away from the window and whispered to my husband that someone was outside. He bolted upright and grabbed a bat from the hall closet. We called the police, whispering into the phone like it mattered. 10 minutes later, the man was gone. No footprints, no tire marks, just the blanket, folded carefully at the edge of the porch. An officer came, took our statement, walked the property, said it was probably a prank, maybe a drifter. They told us to install cameras and call again if it happened. That was it. Lily never woke up. Or maybe she did. The next morning, she didn't ask about the police, didn't mention the man. But when she walked past the blanket, still sitting folded on our kitchen table where we'd brought it inside, she reached out and gently touched it. Then she said, "She's trying to come back." I asked who she meant. She didn't answer. Later that night, I tried searching again. I went deep. Newspaper archives, death records, unsolved cases. Everything I could find about the fire in Gilmer's Hollow and what happened afterward. And that's when I found it. Claire Marie Jensen, the mother, didn't die in the fire. She made it out. Barely. She was in critical condition and died later at the hospital, after telling police her daughter had been taken. Not burned. Not trapped. Taken. But the report was never followed up. No suspect. No evidence. They ruled it a confused trauma response and closed the file. There was one name, though. A man who had visited the house multiple times before the fire. A neighbor, according to the report. Claimed he was just checking on them. No charges were ever filed. His name was listed once. Clyde B. Calloway. And buried in a forgotten county record, tied to a long-defunct real estate deed from 1997, was the owner of the old red pickup truck Lily saw parked behind the trees. Clyde B. Calloway. I didn't say the name out loud right away. I sat on it for a day, kept it tucked in the back of my throat like a stone. Every time I looked at Lily, I thought about the cellar, the blanket, the photo, the man with no expression standing in our driveway in the middle of the night, holding that impossible hand-stitched blanket, and I kept thinking about the records, how everyone believed Claire's daughter died in the fire, how the mother insisted she was taken, how no one believed her. But now, someone else had started believing me. My husband. He still didn't know everything, but he knew enough. The moment I showed him the name Clyde B. Calloway, something changed in his face. Like he'd crossed the same invisible line I had, the one between logic and fear. He started checking locks twice, leaving lights on, walking past windows slower than usual. And Lily was changing too. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She was quiet, focused, like something inside her had clicked into place. That morning, I finally asked her. I sat beside her on the couch while she played with her stuffed bunny and said as gently as I could, "Do you know someone named Clyde Calloway?" She didn't look up, didn't flinch. She just nodded, then said, "He used to watch from the tree." I asked what tree. She said, "The one behind the kitchen window, when Mommy wasn't home." That hit me like a freight train, because behind our kitchen window was an old maple, big, tall, with thick branches, and I'd seen scratch marks on the sill months ago. I thought it was squirrels. She kept talking, calm, almost bored. "He had a camera. He said he liked how I danced. I didn't want to dance, but he said if I didn't, he'd hurt the cat. I had to leave the room. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't cry in front of her. My stomach turned so violently I almost collapsed. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't a past life fairy tale. This was trauma. Real trauma. And somehow, my daughter carried it. That night we booked a hotel in the next town over, just for a night, to clear our heads, to get out of that house. My husband packed the car. I got Lily ready. We left just before sunset, and when we checked in and walked through the lobby, the desk clerk handed me a manila envelope. "There's a note for you," she said. "A man dropped it off earlier, said it was urgent. No name, no ID, just a shaky handwritten label that said, 'For Birdie's mother.'" I opened it in the hotel room while Lily was in the bath. Inside was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but I knew the place. It was the basement, and in the far corner, where we'd seen the baby clothes and the strange brick wall, someone had broken through the bricks. There was a hole now, and inside it, a tiny skeletal arm, still wrapped in a piece of blue flannel. The photo sat in my lap for nearly 20 minutes before I could even touch it again. My husband kept pacing the hotel room, jaw locked, fists clenched like he wanted someone to blame, but we didn't even know who to be afraid of anymore. Was Clyde still alive? Was he the man on our porch? The one who left the blanket? And most terrifying of all, what if he wasn't working alone? That night, we didn't sleep. We laid in the hotel bed with Lily between us, one of us awake at all times. I watched her chest rise and fall for hours, wondering if I'd ever be able to look at her the same way again, because I wasn't sure who she used to be, or how much of her belonged to me. The next morning I made the call. Not to the local police, not to a detective. I called the one name that had been buried in those hospital records, the attending nurse listed on Claire Jensen's file the night she died. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. She was 76 now, lived 2 counties away. I told her everything. Not everything, but enough. I told her I believed a mistake was made, that a child was taken, that she might have been buried in that cellar, behind a wall, while everyone assumed she'd burned in a fire. There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "Claire said that before she passed." Over and over. She kept asking, "Did they check the walls?" I asked if anyone ever followed up. She said no one listened. Everyone thought Claire was delirious. She'd inhaled too much smoke. She was traumatized, but she hadn't been wrong. That same day, I drove back to Gilmer's Hollow, with 2 officers and a county forensics unit behind me. I didn't take Lily. I left her with my husband, safe, far away. They broke through the wall, and behind it, buried in dirt and ash and old bones, was the truth. A child's remains. A tiny body, wrapped in the same kind of flannel Lily had described again and again. A match was confirmed through remaining DNA fragments. Claire Jensen's daughter. The one everyone thought had burned, but she hadn't. She'd been taken, hidden, buried, and she'd never stopped trying to come home. That was 3 months ago. Since then, everything has changed. The case was reopened. Clyde B. Calloway was confirmed dead. Died in 2011. The man on our porch was never identified, never found. The truck, gone by morning. But whoever he was, he had access to things no one else should have had, including the other blanket, including the photo of the burial. And somehow, he knew where we'd be. He knew Lily, knew me. I still don't understand how this happened. How a 5-year-old girl born in a hospital miles away could remember the life of another child who died in secret, whose name was wiped from headlines, whose mother begged someone, anyone, to just check the walls. I don't know what I believe about souls or reincarnation, or the line between memory and trauma, but I do know this. Sometimes when I sit quietly in Lily's room while she colors or plays, she'll pause and stare off like she's remembering something I can't see. She'll touch her blanket, the new one, stitched by my own hands, and say, "I think she's resting now." I ask her who she means. She always answers the same. The other mommy,